Hi, good afternoon, welcome, and good afternoon, good evening. I'm sure there's a lot of people from around the world, so appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Excited for this presentation webinar today in partnership with PECV. The title is AI Governance, Aligning Organizational Policies with Global Standards. And I am Faisal Shafiullah, my part of representing AuditPartners. All right, so a little bit about me. I'm a US-based risk leader, have over 20 years of experience, primarily in IT risk and audit and compliance. I've worked in the Big Four in the external audit positions, internal audit and consulting, and I'm currently helping organizations navigate AI governance along with risk and compliance. It's a very exciting time, unlike any others. And I've also had 3 years of experience currently building tools in the AI space. So not only am I in the audit and risk space, but I'm also a practitioner and operator of these latest technologies and staying in tune. In addition, we AuditPartners are a training provider of ISO certification trainings through PECV. And you can take a look at our catalog of trainings available in our website, which is mentioned below. If you're interested in the 42001, which is more AI focused, we offer that as well. All right, so let's jump right into it. So why are we here today? Well, we know AI adoption is accelerating, and with that comes trust and compliance. Risks are rising. By establishing governance, it ensures responsible, ethical, and effective AI use. And then AI without governance is just really innovation without accountability. It's a very powerful technology, but just like with that, it comes many other responsibilities. So what is AI governance? It's a framework of policies, roles, and our favorite thing as auditors, controls. And it's geared around ensuring AI systems are ethical, they're transparent, they're accountable, and they're compliant. And we'll dive more into that. And it really evolves around 5 key principles. We have fairness, transparency, accountability, security and privacy, and reliability. All right, so here's a person jumping out of a plane. Just imagine this was you with no parachute. That's kind of what AI is without any guardrails. Wouldn't you want to make sure there's so many factors that go into this. Is the company reputable that you're choosing to jump from? Is the pilot trained? Is the equipment, has it been tested, and is it from a reputable company? You know, has the person also diving been trained and aware of all the risk and what to do? So these are the things we have to consider when it comes to our governance. I think this wheel here really depicts kind of what that is. And again, it's around ensuring ethical, transparent, and accountable AI practices. It starts with accountability, as we mentioned. These days, it's a digital world. We have to be accountable for what we have. Trustworthiness. Can we trust and rely upon the information that we're using? Is it responsible? You know, I saw recently ChatGPT is now reporting to the agencies if there's any kind of harmful action, and they've actually taken immediate action on those. Privacy, ensuring that company information and customer information is not exposed. Safety and security, and then transparency, right? So there's all these different things that go into the wheelhouse. It's monitoring, it's tools, it's the model, it's policies and procedures, it's risk and compliance, roles and responsibilities. What models are you using? All right, I'm gonna go off camera here. I'm sure if I'll turn it back on at the end, but since this is just a one-way camera session, I'll go off camera for now. Okay, so why does AI governance matter? Well, AI governance aligns risk management with trust. We're gonna hear that word a lot today, trust, get used to it. Compliance and business value. Some of us on this call today may sit within all 3 of these functions or one of the 3. Maybe you're a business a SaaS company and you want an organization and you want to provide value to your customers. So risk without AI governance, what does that mean? We have control failures. There's bias and discrimination. For example, unfair hiring practices or credit approvals. We'll talk more about that. There's regulatory exposure, fines under the EU AI Act, which many of you are aware of. We have GDPR, and then there's communications FTC enforcement. There's reputational risk. Negative audit findings can damage public trust. Audit gaps, lack of documentation, traceability, and accountability, going back to some of those core principles. So this is really relevant, especially the audit gaps, for service organizations seeking to maintain customer trust. We see now there's the SOC 2 ISO certifications that's become very formal as part of the due diligence process, working with other organizations. What are some of the benefits? Well, building trust and value through AI governance. Again, the word trust, right? Enhanced trust and assurance means stakeholders see transparent, governed AI use. We know it's a very powerful tool. I think initially people were hiding their screens and being shameful of it, but we should embrace it and embrace it with guardrails and putting controls and governance in place. Innovation with controls, safe adoption, right? This is what we just mentioned, safe adoption backed by governance testing. It's a very powerful tool. You can use it in many ways. We'll also be able to, with assurance, be able to comply with the different audits, compliance audits out there, such as 42001, NIST, the EU AI Act, and then OECD as well. And then it provides competitive edge, being able to let organizations and customers know, and even within, that AI governance reduces audit findings and you're able to provide market trust. All right, so global standards. These are the guardrails. You're going to hear a lot of common themes. It's AI standards providing benchmarks auditors can align their policies and control against. How many of us can relate to this picture here? Imagine your kids or little toddlers, grandkids, whatever it is, we're running the show. Food, candy, chips, phone, tantrums, all over the place. Well, that's where parenting comes in, and it's very similar to governance. Applying those same guardrails that we do in our life to the technology that's in our business and our lives today. All right, let's talk about the key frameworks. We have the EU AI Act. This is a risk-based law. The EU has been very advanced and I think they've been very leading in this area to provide this information and provide guidance around this compliance for everyone that's tied to this, if it applies to you, sorry. And then ISO 42001, we know this was the first certifiable AI governance system. We have the NIST AI, which is primarily US focused and globally referenced still, and then OECD AI principles. And this can act as a baseline. Let's talk a little bit more about these. So ISO 42001, it's the AI management system. And it's the first international standard for AI governance, published in 2023. It requires documented policies, your intent, and technical controls enforcement. It applies to any organization either developing, deploying, or using AI. We're seeing a lot of organizations starting to be proactive and become ISO 42001 certified. And I think this is going to continue to grow as it becomes a globally recognized standard for AI governance and trust. We have NIST, the NIST AI Risk Management Framework. Again, it's US-centric, but it's widely adopted globally. And it comes down to 4 core functions auditors can test. It's around governing, mapping, measuring, and managing. and it applies to both public and private organizations. Many US organizations that are doing business in the defense or with the government, they're required to have these different frameworks in place along with other compliance measurements. In addition to not only wanting to provide this to your customers, but it's also good practice to have internally. We have the EU AI Act. It's a risk-based law across the European Union. High-risk AI, focused in HR, healthcare, finance, public sectors. It requires compliance evidence and applies to any company placing AI systems in the EU market, regardless of your headquarter location. So just think about that. You may want to consult with legal or your different compliance to understand what your compliance regulations and requirements are. All right, so we talked a lot about different audits and frameworks. I just want to remind people here, audits do not equal security or governance. It's a structured control framework that auditors can test. And we see that with the ISO 42001 and NIST frameworks. And in certain instances, like the EU AI Act, it's a hard law. Auditors must verify compliance. Organizations must attest to their compliance with the Act. And then it can also be best practice and principles, like we see here with the OECD. So I think this picture, if you take a look at this picture, there's a lot of different things that are on the drawing board. And all of these, not limited to, kind of go into all of this. So it's a constant iteration and maturing of your controls in your environment. All right, so why AI governance now? We've seen explosive adoption. PwC reported in 2024 that 77% of companies are now experimenting with or deploying AI. I think this number is a lot higher now. Initially, organizations were trying to build, and now they're going to buy. And we're seeing more adoption across the market, especially in different industries. We have shadow AI risks. Guess what? There's organizations and employees within different organizations that are using unapproved AI tools. So why not encourage it and put controls around it to prevent data leakage and other risks that are out there? We have regulatory momentum. Organizations now have to comply. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. And then we have high profile failures like the IBM Watson incident, the Amazon hiring AI incident, the UK grading fiasco, and it shows poor governance. Back in the early 2000s, we saw with the Enron and WorldCom scandals how Sarbanes-Oxley came as a result of that. We're going to see a lot more of this, and we already are. Trust is a differentiator. Clients, investors, regulators, organizations want transparency, especially when it comes to AI. And then audit demand. If it's not as already one of your enterprise risk, overall risk entity-wide, it will be. And it will only continue to grow, just like we saw with cybersecurity and SOX. All right, so risk without governance. Here's some real world examples I mentioned earlier. I'm going to give you some scenarios here around healthcare. We had the IBM Watson oncology misdiagnosis. Sorry, that's a tongue twister. Recruitment, Amazon AI, a tool discriminated against women, and I'll tell you why. Finance, mortgage lenders, they were sued for biased AI loan approvals. So here's a case study one. This is the IBM Watson oncology. This is all public information, so you can go take a look at this. But it was a breakthrough in AI meant to support cancer diagnosis and give treatment recommendations. The system produced unsafe, incorrect treatment advice in many instances. Just imagine you're playing with someone's life here. My father just went through a open heart surgery at a very old age. And we had to take all this information, in fact, And I used AI to become, help educate myself. But I also validated that and ultimately trusted what I learned from the doctors and all the information that was available to me. So just imagine giving unsafe or incorrect treatment advice. And it was primarily due to a very small sample set. They had a small group of doctors that were using synthetic cases and not real world patient data. What was the impact? Hospitals that trial Watson, well, guess what? They reported inaccurate recommendations, reputational risk for IBM, and loss of trust in AI. It's very hard to bounce back from that. There was a governance gap. There's no independent validation, as we know, limited auditability of training data, lack of documented bias accuracy policies. So as auditors, we would ask, where's the evidence of model testing and validation? Were clinical safety controls documented and enforced and considered? These are just some of the things you can start thinking about how it applies in a governance mindset. Study 2. So Amazon developed an internal AI tool to screen job applications. We see this more widespread now coming across, and this was back in 2008, earlier than the boom that we've seen today with AI. And the issue was the system discriminated against women. It really downgraded resumes which contained the word women's. For example, if it had a women's chess club captain enlisted in their activities, it would give them negative points. And the reasoning was because the AI was trained on 10 years of historical resumes, and it was mostly from men, reflecting technical industry bias. So just imagine, not only did it put them at a disadvantage, it also was not ethical. The impact was there. The tool was scrapped in 2018, and it generated public criticism and reputational harm. Very hard to go work for an organization or recruit when you're a company like Amazon trying to recruit the top talent. And again, the governance gap. There was a lack of bias and fairness. No diversity controls in training data, no regular audits. As auditors, we would ask, did the organization conduct bias testing? Was there a documented policy requiring review of training data? Quality and representativeness. So these are things to consider. Obviously, these are just some consideration points, but I want you to think about it from a holistic risk perspective, conducting risk assessments and having those conversations with the business. All right, let's look at the governance pillars. We've got data privacy and protection, areas like GDPR. We saw Clearview was fined $20 million for AI related to GDPR. Security and resilience, incorrect AI examples in healthcare, as we just showed. Bias and fairness, we just mentioned that again, hiring and lending lawsuits. Transparency, we had the UK grading scandal, created public outrage. These are, public institutions you want to have trust in. And then accountability. Regulators may hold boards personally liable. And we're seeing that a lot with different regulations in the US as well. I think we're doing pretty good on time here. Since the presentation is around organizational policies, when I think of policies, I not only think of paper documents, but I also think of controls, just going back to the entire wheelhouse of how the governance model works. But I listed here some of the top 10 AI governance policies. Let's start with the left-hand side. So we have governance policies. This is more intent and paper-driven. You should have an AI use policy, and it should define acceptable, unacceptable usage. This can either be a separate policy or you can add it onto your existing policy. Transparency and disclosure policy, labeling AI generated outputs. similar to how you would with confidential documents and sensitive documents. It's adding another bucket in that mix. So think about that. Bias and fairness policy, mandating testing for discrimination. What are we using the AI for? And could there be discrimination or unfair bias in our outputs and inputs? Data privacy and security, again, aligning with best in practice privacy and security frameworks and requirements. Again, if you're required to be compliant based on your jurisdiction with the EU AI Act or various compliance, I highly recommend you reach out to your legal counsel or you internally understand what those compliance requirements are. And then we have the model risk management policies. So the life cycle oversight. It's very similar to how you would with the SDLC process. Now let's talk about the technical policies, the enforcement controls. So a lot of AI and data that we're using today is tied to third-party and vendors. We want to ensure we have policies over that, especially where we are enforcing vendor due diligence. AI is no secret. I would encourage you to ask those questions and ask your vendors, hey, how are you guys using AI? Where is your data stored? What model are you using? Are you rotating your API keys? There's a lot of different things and factors that go into this. Incident response and escalation policy. So log your AI issues, just like you would with an incident, any other incidents. It's no different than another extension of your business in your technology. Encourage the business to actually respond to it and log these. It will overall provide better results for everyone. Access and usage control policies. So right now we're seeing, I think we're in the early days, just like we were with cloud storage, but we'll see more robust enterprise level AI security. And we're already seeing that today across the enterprise packages, but I believe it'll be more widely adopted in the future, where you can enforce role-based access and restrict certain high-risk AI tools. So keep a lookout for that. If you have a way to do this in your organization, currently, I would encourage having those conversations with your business, but obviously, make sure you have the right business case and that you're coming to a collective decision. Employee training and awareness, we'll talk more about this, but mandatory training, again, humans, it always comes down to humans at the end of the day. We need to ensure that we're aware and we're being trained. That way, we're able to be doing what's best for the organization and our customers. And then auditing and monitoring policy. We want to ensure that there's transparency and there's trust. And that sometimes comes in the form of audit and monitoring. All right, let's talk about operationalizing AI governance. So there's a lot of information there. And where do we go from here? First thing, you need to establish a cross-functional governance committee. This is no different than your risk committees, but it's just a new technology, new innovation. And that should be made up of a variety of departments and stakeholders within your organization, both internally and externally. Bring in experts if you need. I help many companies, organizations where we sit in and ask them questions. What about this? What about that? There's a lot of vibe coding applications that we're seeing in the market right now that have a lot of high risk AI uses and are using public models that are training with your data. To assess AI use cases and risks and establish charters. Meet frequently, have formal communications and meeting touch points. And then and embed that into your formal enterprise risk management program. Map relevant standards. What standards would apply to me? Which ones do I want to apply? These days, this is all new information. The technology is new, but the controls and risk are for the most part, the foundation is very, it's a pollination across all of them. And you can do more than what your frameworks, if you choose to go with one framework. Implementing a hybrid approach, ISO 27001, a piece, maybe your PII, you have high trust and you're doing ISO 42001 and NIST AI. So there's a lot of different compliance ways to come around this, and being sure that you're able to implement a successful AI risk program. But start small, understand what your risks are today. And then implement policies. So that way, your actions are now real. It's now documented. Organizations must comply and adhere to the policies. Pretty soon, we're going to start seeing insurance companies, cyber insurance, and other organizations asking that you have policies and procedures in place or governing around AI. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Get ahead of that today. We're also working on, it's pretty exciting. I want to maybe touch back here. I think earlier I mentioned that I've been in the space for the last 3 years. I'm working on a tool that is really going to be self-guided, and it helps to rewrite policies based on your frameworks. So we're excited to launch that soon. Of course, we've been going through all these governance models testing so that way we can ensure trust, but we're currently even helping organizations to rewrite their policies and expand upon them. So take a look for that. AI can be used in many ways, not only to do business use cases, but also for auditing use cases. Lifecycle governance, very similar to a change management SDLC process, ensuring that you're using the right data, you have controls in place, the configurations are there. Recently I went through an AI tool that we're building, and we're using a third party. Just clicking through the amount of configurations and customizations that were there, it was very important for me to understand what all of those risks and different functions are and how that relates to what we're doing overall in our governance process. And then once you have that, scale it across the enterprise. Start a pilot with different departments working in different areas. All right, here's some of the challenges and pitfalls that I see. Lack of executive buy-in. I had a friend of mine who's a CIO at an organization. I recently asked him about their AI journey, and he gave me the cookie cutter response of, "Oh, we're meeting in the summer." This was earlier in the year, and he said, "We're meeting in the summer to talk about AI." And I immediately just shook my head because he's a good friend of mine. I told him, I said, you should probably go into that session with somewhat of a game plan, because it's not something you can ignore. It's already here. You need to be proactive and ahead of it. So that includes getting executive buy-in, having sponsors, champions in different areas. You can have champions at different levels of those processes, and that can also be part of your committees. Check the box compliance. We're seeing a lot of information out there around quality of audits. Well, this can easily fall into that bucket, but do what's right. Because at the end of the day, the trust and risk factors are there. And then overcomplication, it slows innovation. And sometimes you have to be overcomplicated, but I think there's a good balance between that. All right, so let's talk about some actual controls to consider and policies to implement. These are not just paper policies, but certain things. We're seeing a rise in deepfakes and payment fraud. There's voice recognition now that is so real, and cloning your avatar of yourself that looks almost like you, nobody would know. And certain controls to consider, policies to implement, or could be, ensuring you have dual factor authorization for high risk AP payments. The last thing you want is someone calling your AP manager on a Friday who's been tired, claiming to be the CEO or CFO with their voice, asking them to issue a payment immediately before the weekend. This happens. Cybersecurity criminals and hackers are becoming more and more sophisticated. Not only are we using AI, but guess what? They're using it as well, and they're using it for the wrong reasons. Biometric validation. Again, there's deepfakes there, but there's ways around there. There's new tools coming out where you may have dual factor approvals, a face call, so something of that nature. Callback verification, first time vendor payments. And we saw in 2019, there's a European energy firm which lost 200,000 euros in a CEO voice deepfake scam. So just imagine, deepfakes and payment fraud is getting more and more prevalent, and these are certain controls at a minimum, as a suggestion that you can apply. We have preventing data leakage into AI models. By the way, I want to take a quick pause. If you have questions, please ensure you're putting them in the chat. We will have a time for the question and answer session towards the end. We're coming up towards 15 minutes at the hour. But I want to make sure if you have something that comes up, drop it in the chat. Our panelists and organizers are reviewing that, and we'll bring that up at the end. All right, so preventing data leakage into AI models. You can use a variety of MDM tools in Intune to block and copy paste text that would go into ChatGPT or LLMs. Apply conditional access, restricting AI access to corporate managed devices. Implementing data loss protection to detect sensitive data before it leaves endpoints. Remember, I mentioned earlier, classifying your data. AI could be part of that classification, and it should be. Here's many overlooked controls. Third-party AI risk assessments, requiring vendors to disclose AI training data and controls. We talked about this. Model access segmentation. Enforcing role-based access. Again, I think there's limitation in this right now, as most of these AI tools are just haven't gotten really enterprise grade, but we're going to see more of this. And again, you'll be able to customize this down to different provision and role-based access that similar to what we have today. And then watermarking and logging, applying watermarks to AI outputs and centralizing audit logs. I think we see now on YouTube and Instagram where influencers are required to put an AI output label. We have AI policy and controls. So clear AI use policies for employees, making sure they're not uploading client data into unprotected environments. There will be a time or way around this, and you may have already implemented controls, so this doesn't apply to you. But this is more what I'm mentioning is of the wild, wild west. Regular training. AI is growing exponentially. The scams and fraud that come with that will not only grow at the same rate, but these guys are very clever in how they are going to use the AI and different technology. Restricting AI bots in Slack and Teams. Sometimes these things are auto-configured. You join a channel. Did anyone think where that information is going or who it's being shared with? Maybe it was a very private channel. Maybe the information was not meant for public information. And guess what? Maybe now, because someone invited you to a channel, that AI has access to your data and is being trained or used for the wrong reasons without your consent. Right, so we have some common questions or concerns that come up. Where should we start? I think it's essential to understand where your current policies are, and then understanding what the AI risks are, not only within your business, but outside your business. Could it be third-party risk, supply chain risk, brand risk? Using the risk assessment methodology, understanding what those risks are. And this is where I'm currently helping organizations do this at the base level, at the foundation level. Which framework should I use first? Well, if you're required to be compliant with the EU AI Act, you may want to choose that. You're required to choose that and have to mandated to be compliant against that. We'll see more and more of this across different regions. And then how do we balance compliance versus innovation? So you can always use a high risk, risk-based approach, working with stronger controls for higher risk areas and allowing flexibility where risk is low. For example, if you want to help someone to rewrite a basic email or in a different tone and there's no sensitive information, maybe that's a low risk, that's a low risk scenario. And then who should own AI governance? Again, it's a collective effort. Can't tell you time and time again. Cross-functional. It should be IT security, compliance, legal, finance, everywhere where technology is really used in the business. And establishing champions across those teams, meeting regularly, documenting your meetings, having a tracker to ensure that you're following up on those items, similar to how you would with an ISMS today. And then audit committees, they should oversee governance, just as they do with cyber risk. Welcome them to have a seat at the table. Bring them in. All right, so let's move it up. I think we're a little ahead on time. Desiree, this is a very interesting session. I think there's probably a lot of questions, or maybe not, but I'd like to open it up. I think, if you're interested or you want to reach out to me, you can scan the QR code. That's to my LinkedIn, and you'll be able to, happy to set up a one-on-one call or chat with you or share more information. But Desiree, I appreciate the opportunity with PCB and Albert, everyone, for bringing these webinars together. As we mentioned, it's a very exciting time with the technology. We'll need to, be ahead of this, just like any other technology or new innovation that comes along. We've already seen a lot of concern and risk from leaders about how AI could be used for wrong purposes, and putting those guardrails as auditors or risk or compliance chiefs, it's important to be at the forefront of that. All right, so we have a question here. Desiree, I'll take this first question. Why is it important for different teams like legal, IT, HR to work together on AI governance? I think it's a great question, and we touched on this a little earlier. It's important because we see a lot of shadow AI going on, and organizations may be using, number one, you could be using different tools for the same purpose. So there's a cost for, operationally, there's a cost savings there. Number two, if policies are coming from the top down, you also want to ensure that those departments have a say and they're able to help define what those policy requirements are. In addition, you want their buy-in. So I believe bringing those teams together, it's a very new, exciting space. The more, the merrier, in a way to be able to ensure that the organization is doing what's best. All right. In the meantime, I think we're a little early too, but I don't know how many questions we have, Desiree. I'd love to see what industry and where you're from. So drop your location or a hello from where you are and what industry. I'd love to see some of that as well. All right. What big global changes in AI rules should organizations prepare for in the near future? What big global changes in AI rules prepare for in the near future? That's a good question. I think if I had a crystal ball in being able to predict this, I think it's going to be, as we continue to progress, there will be more education and awareness as a result of research and also as a result of bad actors, really in response to putting regulation and changes so that we're protecting not only organizations, but the mankind, right? There's a lot of theories out there. So as this continues to evolve, there's global, let's say for environmental, AI uses a lot of power. ESG is going to continue to grow with this. There will be more heavily focus and requirements to not only provide security and governance and privacy, but also environmental impacts. How does that kind of tie into that ecosystem? And we're already starting to work on some of this and bringing these together as part of a multifaceted framework. So we'll also see a lot more of, I think the tools and technology will inherently become more restrictive, as we saw with the alerting the law enforcement and so forth on improper usage. So we'll see more of that as well. Desiree, is there any more questions? Let's see. Okay. What controls should be used to validate AI outputs and to ensure that hallucinations are not happening? I think this goes back to your model governance that we were mentioning and training and testing the data. I'll mention hallucination was a very big factor when when AI models first came out. And now, I think there's an example out there around how many R's are in strawberry and the AI model gives a wrong answer. So we'll see more and more on this, but I've seen a reduction in hallucination, right or wrong, but there's ways around this. There's RAG models you can build internally where you're fine-tuning models. You'll also see more fine-tuned models, which there's a term SLM, which is smaller language models that are more focused on domain and industry versus a model that knows, it's trained on everything, the entire internet. So that will also help to reduce some hallucination. You'll also have to do validation. AI is a technology to really help us. It's not intended to replace humans. We still need humans in the loop. And I think it's a very important point that you're involved in this process, that you have validation controls, that there's data accuracy and trust in as part of your outputs. So yeah, let's see what other questions we have here. How can all right, what controls should be used to validate AI outputs? Yep, we just covered that. I'm an AI UX UI designer. How can someone like myself get into compliance? Would my current skill set be valuable? 100%. This is a great question. With the ISO 42001 certification, I can speak to this personally, as we offer it as a PCB partner, and I'm also ISO 42001 certified. There's 3 various levels and courses that are offered. Number 1 is the ISO 42001 foundational course, which is a 2-day course, understanding just overall what the AI risk and compliance means, and overall just about AI. And then there's the AI implementer So in your case, if you're a UX or a UI designer, you want to understand how you are implementing the code safely in a safe environment. I'll tell you, for example, recently, I tried vibe coding early days, and a lot of the code, if you really dive into the coding and how these outputs are, there's code that's in draft that's just sitting within the code, and they may have bugs there. So if you're deploying a Next.js front end, or you're using some other UI UX tool like a Figma or Canvas or some other third-party tool to help generate your outputs, you want to ensure that you understand the risks that are there, and that you're also providing that information to your customers so they're aware. A lot of this is going to come down to educating each other, because this is all new, right? This is all new times, and we all have to learn from each other. So I highly recommend you check that out. You can reach out to us directly if you're interested. I can share more information, or you can reach out to PECB directly as well. All right. How can leaders make AI use more open and responsible without slowing down progress? That's a great question. We see organizations adopting some of the enterprise solutions such as Copilot. So if you're an organization that is using Microsoft, you may have already rolled out Copilot. There may be internal wikis or forums that people are sharing use cases I've seen. So I believe promoting collaboration is key here, and really helping each other out, sharing use cases, sharing new tools, going through that governance model, not just bringing things on, but making sure you're understanding exactly what technology you're using and how you're using it. All right. All right. Well, I think that's it. Yeah, this has been a very good session. I believe there's no other questions here. But again, this was very valuable. I'll put this back up here for you if you're interested in connecting. We're getting ready to launch some really cool tools that are going to not only help auditors, and it's really for all three lines of defense, first, second, and third, where if you're a business owner or you're an auditor or an auditee, you can really leverage the AI to make the process more efficient, get better results, and at your fingertips. So I'm excited to bring those out. I would highly recommend, if you're not already, follow me on LinkedIn. Drop me a note. Tell me what you think about the webinar. I like doing these, and constantly this is a improvement for myself to help my speaking skills as well. So thank you all for your time. I appreciate your time, and thank you again, PCB, for such a great webinar.